It was Christmas Day, and the city was full of noise, lights, and busy people rushing to their destinations. But in the midst of all the holiday cheer, a shocking moment was about to unfold, a moment that would change the lives of four little children forever. Evelyn Hartwell, a billionaire who owned one of the biggest companies in the world, was driving in her luxurious SUV. She had just finished a busy meeting and was on her way home to spend Christmas alone. She stared out the window, thinking about how empty her life felt without her son, Daniel. He had passed away years ago, and since then, Evelyn had shut herself off from everything, including family. Her assistant was sitting quietly beside her. "Madam, we're almost home. Would you like me to get the presents ready?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood. Evelyn didn't answer at first. She just stared out the window, her mind drifting back to her son. She missed him every day. But suddenly, something caught her eye. She blinked, and then her heart stopped. By the side of the road, in a small, dirty corner of the city, four children were sitting on the cold pavement. Their clothes were torn and stained, their tiny faces full of dirt. They looked hungry, tired, and lost. And the worst part? They were all identical, for little kids, no older than 4 years old. It was hard to believe, but she could see it clearly. Their faces were so familiar, it made her breath catch in her throat. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she reached for the window button, and before she could think twice, the car slowed to a stop. She looked again. The four children were huddled together, as if trying to keep warm in the cold December air. But what really made Evelyn's heart race was the woman kneeling beside them. She looked so familiar, too. Her heart pounded as she stared at her. The woman was holding the children close, wrapping them in her arms, doing everything she could to protect them. Evelyn's voice came out in a whisper. Those are my grandchildren." She couldn't believe it. Her own flesh and blood. Children she had never known about. Children she had lost in the whirlwind of her own selfish decisions. She pressed her hand to the glass, staring at the children, who looked so much like her son, Daniel. Her assistant looked at her, confused. "Madam, are you sure?" She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the children. "I've made so many mistakes. I was too blind to see the truth. But now I see them." The woman beside the children, Amara, lifted her head slightly, sensing someone watching. Her eyes met Evelyn's for a brief moment before she quickly looked away. She wasn't looking for help. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just trying to survive. Evelyn's heart shattered at the sight of her. Amara had been through so much. She was the mother of these children, and she was struggling to keep them alive in a world that seemed to have forgotten them. Evelyn wanted to jump out of the car, to run to them, to take them away from the streets and into her home. But she was frozen. She didn't know how to start. And then the moment was broken. The traffic light turned green, and the car behind them honked impatiently. The world began to move again, but Evelyn stayed still, her thoughts racing. The children, the woman, her son. She could see it all now. The life she had missed out on. The family she had lost. Her assistant looked at her again, concern in his voice. "Madam, we need to leave now. You're going to be late for the meeting." Evelyn didn't move. She couldn't move. "No, stop the car," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Madam, stop the car," she repeated, her tone stronger now. "I have to go to them." The SUV rolled to a stop, and Evelyn opened the door before her assistant could say another word. She stepped out onto the cold street, the noise of the city fading as she walked toward the children. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she approached them. Amara looked up again, her eyes wide with fear. She wasn't sure what to make of this stranger walking toward her, this woman who looked so out of place in this rough neighborhood. Evelyn stopped just a few feet away from them. She could feel her heart beating in her ears. The children were staring at her, their tiny faces filled with confusion. They didn't know her. They didn't know the truth. And Evelyn wasn't sure how to tell them. But one of the children, a little boy with bright eyes and a big smile, looked up at her and whispered, "Grandma?" Evelyn's knees nearly gave out from under her. The word hit her like a ton of bricks. She felt like she couldn't breathe. This little boy, this sweet child, had just called her grandma. It was too much. She had waited her whole life for this moment, and now that it was here, she didn't know what to do. Amara's voice broke through the silence. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharp with fear. "What do you want?" Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to explain. She had to tell her. I'm your children's grandmother," she said softly, her voice shaking. I'm Evelyn Hartwell. Amara's eyes widened. She was clearly confused. Grandmother? What do you mean? You're lying, aren't you? You just want to take them away. Evelyn took a step forward, her hands shaking. I'm not lying. I swear I'm not lying. They're my grandchildren, and I want to help. Please, just let me help. Amara took a step back, still clutching her children. I don't trust you. I don't know you. I don't care if you're rich or famous. These kids are mine, and I won't let anyone take them away. Evelyn swallowed hard. I'm not here to take them from you. I'm here to protect them. Please, Amara. Please believe me. But before Amara could respond, the sound of approaching sirens broke the tension. The police were coming. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change. The sirens grew louder. The crowd was starting to gather. The tension in the air was thick. What would happen now? Would Evelyn be able to prove who she was? Would Amara believe her? The light turned green, and the world began to move again. But for Evelyn, everything had stopped. It was just her, Amara, and the children. And she wasn't going anywhere until she had answers. Before we continue, do well to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to support our growth. Tell us where you are watching from. The police officers pulled up to the corner, their lights flashing in the distance, drawing a crowd that began to form around Evelyn, Amara, and the 4 children. It was chaos, but it was also a moment of pause, a breath that everyone seemed to be holding. Evelyn's heart raced. She hadn't expected this. The sirens, the attention, the fear that swelled in Amara's eyes as she clutched her children even tighter. She wasn't sure if she could trust the police, or if they would even believe her story. They didn't know her. They didn't know the history of Daniel, her son. They didn't know about the family she had pushed away. The officers got out of their cars, looking at the group with a mixture of confusion and concern. Amara stepped protectively in front of the children, blocking them from the officers' view, her voice sharp with fear. Don't come near them, she said, her voice trembling but strong. They're mine. They've always been mine. No one is taking them from me. Evelyn felt a wave of sadness crash over her. She knew Amara was scared, but she also knew that she couldn't leave without trying, without at least saying the words that had been burning inside her for so long. She stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm not here to take them from you, Evelyn said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm their grandmother. I'm Daniel's mother. Amara turned her head, eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you talking about? Who are you? Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a small photo of Daniel, the only one she had left. She had kept it hidden away, tucked in a drawer, never allowing herself to look at it for too long. She couldn't face the pain. But now, holding the photo, she knew she had to show it to Amara, to prove that she was telling the truth. She handed the photo to Amara. The younger woman took it hesitantly, her eyes flicking over the picture of the smiling young man. Daniel, her son. The man she had rejected so many years ago. The man whose children were now standing in front of her, hungry and confused. Amara's hands shook as she looked at the photo, her face a mix of confusion and disbelief. She looked up at Evelyn. This is him, she said, her voice barely a whisper. This is Daniel. But this doesn't make sense. If you're his mother, why? Why did you abandon him? Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had no answer. She had spent years trying to bury the guilt, trying to ignore the pain of losing her son, of turning her back on him when he needed her most. She had been wrong, and now, looking into Amara's eyes, she could see the same pain mirrored in her. Amara had fought for her children, and Evelyn had failed her own. I was foolish, Evelyn finally said, her voice trembling. I didn't understand. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was wrong. I pushed him away. I failed him, Amara. And now I want to make it right. I want to protect his children. Amara stared at her, her eyes searching Evelyn's face. And you expect me to believe you? After everything? After you shut him out? You didn't even know about them. You didn't even know your own grandchildren were out here, starving. Her voice broke with the last word. The raw pain in Amara's voice hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She had never felt so ashamed. She had been living in her bubble, consumed by her wealth and her business, too focused on her own regrets to see what truly mattered. Now, standing here in front of the woman her son had loved, in front of the children who carried his blood, Evelyn realized the magnitude of her mistake. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "But please, let me help. Let me prove to you that I'm not the same woman I was back then. I've learned. I've changed. I want to be a part of their lives. I want to be their grandmother." For a long moment, Amara said nothing. She just stood there, her arms still tightly around the children, her face unreadable. The tension in the air was thick, and the crowd that had gathered was silent, waiting for the next move. Evelyn knew that she couldn't just expect trust to appear. She had to earn it. But how could she earn the trust of a mother who had already lost so much? How could she ask Amara to believe her after everything she had done? Amara finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "You don't know what it's like. You don't know what I've been through. I've done everything for them. I've fought to keep them alive. I won't let anyone take them away from me. I'm not here to take them," Evelyn repeated, her voice steady now. "I'm here to help. I swear it." Amara's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but then she stepped back slightly, her grip on the children loosening just enough to allow them to breathe. Liam, the oldest of the quadruplets, looked up at Evelyn, his big eyes filled with curiosity. He tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Is she telling the truth, Mama?" Evelyn's heart skipped a beat at the sound of those words. "I promise I'm telling the truth," she said softly, kneeling down to Liam's level. "I'm your grandma, and I'm here to protect you." Liam stared at her for a long moment, his small face serious. Then, without warning, he reached out his tiny hand, placing it in Evelyn's. It was a simple gesture, but to Evelyn, it felt like the world. Amara watched the exchange closely, her expression still filled with doubt. She wasn't ready to fully trust Evelyn yet, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hope, a small spark of belief, that made her pause. Just then, the officers stepped forward again, their voices firm but calm. "We need to make sure the children are safe," one of the officers said. "We're going to take them to the hospital for a checkup." Evelyn's heart clenched at the thought of the children being taken away. She wasn't ready to let them go, not when she had just found them. But she knew it was the right thing. Amara needed help, and so did the children. "I'll go with them," Evelyn said quickly, standing up and walking toward the officers. "I'll go with you. I'm their grandmother. I have every right to be there." The officer looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, you can come, but we'll need to verify everything before we proceed." As Evelyn and Amara followed the officers to the hospital, the tension between them was still thick. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. Evelyn knew that this was only the beginning. The road to earning Amara's trust would be long, but she had to try. For Daniel, for the children, and for herself. The hospital was sterile and quiet, its walls lined with white tiles that gleamed under the bright fluorescent lights. Evelyn felt out of place as she walked through the sterile halls, her designer heels clicking against the cold floor. Beside her, Amara walked closely, her expression tense, eyes darting nervously around the hospital. The quadruplets, Liam, Sophie, Noah, and Ella, clung to their mother's sides, their tiny hands reaching out for comfort. The officers led the way, speaking quietly into their radios, making sure the children were safe. Evelyn kept her eyes on them, feeling the weight of every step. She was surrounded by the noise of her own thoughts, wondering if this was the right choice, if she could really protect them, or if she was too late. Too many years had passed. Too many mistakes had been made. But now, she had a second chance. A fragile one. And she wasn't going to let it slip away. Amara hadn't spoken much since the car ride, her silence heavy, but Evelyn understood. She was scared, defensive, and still deeply uncertain. The young mother had a right to be. Evelyn had never been there for her son, Daniel, and she was only just learning about the children he left behind. As they approached the hospital rooms, Evelyn noticed the sharp intake of breath from Amara. She hadn't been prepared for the hospital's cold, sterile atmosphere, or the busy nurses and doctors hustling around the hallways. Amara's grip on her children tightened, as if she was ready to run at any moment. Evelyn could feel the coldness in the air. She had to make Amara understand. She had to show her that she was different now, that she could be trusted, that she could be a part of their lives. They were led to a small examination room. The bright light made everything feel even more distant and clinical. The doctors moved quickly, setting up tests, checking vitals, and asking questions. Liam, Sophie, Noah, and Ella sat on the examination table, each of them looking at their mother, their faces full of confusion and curiosity. Evelyn stood by the door, watching them closely. She could see the little hands trembling, the eyes that held secrets far beyond their years. She wanted to rush over and scoop them up, tell them everything would be okay. But she couldn't. Not yet. Amara stood beside her children, arms folded tightly, eyes never leaving the doctor's. She was on edge, still unsure about Evelyn's presence in the room. Evelyn could see the storm of emotions battling inside her. Fear, doubt, and a small, fragile hope. A nurse approached Evelyn, her voice soft. "Madam, we have the test results. We'll need your confirmation before we proceed with any further procedures." Evelyn nodded quickly, her breath catching in her throat. "I'm ready," she said quietly. But even as she spoke, she knew there was no way to fully prepare for what was coming next. The moment of truth had arrived, and it could break everything or change everything. The nurse handed her a clipboard with a series of documents, and Evelyn's hands shook as she took it. She scanned the papers, her eyes falling on the names. The results confirmed what she already knew in her heart. They were his children, Daniel's children. Her heart swelled with a mix of relief and grief. Relief, because she had been right all along. And grief, because Daniel would never get to meet them, to see them grow, to be a father to them. All those years of pain, regret, and mistakes rushed back to her in an overwhelming wave. Amara was watching her closely now. The younger woman's eyes flickered with suspicion and doubt. "What are you reading?" she asked, her voice sharp. Evelyn looked up at Amara, her throat tight. She handed the clipboard over to Amara. "I'm their grandmother," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Daniel's mother. The DNA confirms it." Amara took the clipboard, her hands trembling as she looked at the documents. Her eyes widened in shock as she read the confirmation. She looked up at Evelyn, her face a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You've got to be kidding me," Amara whispered, her voice cracking. You're their grandmother?" Evelyn nodded slowly. She could feel Amara's gaze on her, full of questions, full of uncertainty. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for not being there before. I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I want to help. I want to protect them." Amara didn't say anything at first. She just stared at Evelyn, as if trying to decide if this was some cruel joke. The room felt heavy, like the air was thick with tension. Evelyn held her breath, waiting for Amara's response. Finally, Amara spoke, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why now?" she asked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you care when he was alive? Why did you abandon him? Why did you leave us all alone?" Evelyn felt the words cut through her like a knife. She couldn't defend herself. She had no excuse. She had failed them. She had failed Daniel. "I was wrong," Evelyn said softly, her voice breaking. "I was blinded by my own pride, my own fear. I thought I was protecting him, but I only pushed him away. I failed him. And now I'm here, trying to make it right." Amara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said, her voice barely audible. "You've been gone for so long. How do I know you won't leave again?" Evelyn stepped closer, her heart aching. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, her voice firm with conviction. "I will not leave you. I will not leave them." For a moment, the room was silent, and Evelyn wasn't sure if Amara would ever trust her, if she could ever make up for the years lost. But then, Liam, the little boy who had called her grandma, reached up and tugged on her sleeve. "Grandma," he said softly, his tiny voice filled with innocence and hope. "Will you stay?" Evelyn's heart broke at the sound of the word. She bent down, meeting Liam's gaze, her tears falling freely. "I'm here, my love," she whispered. "I'm here, and I'll stay. I promise." Amara looked at her, her face a mix of emotions, and for the first time, she nodded. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and touched Evelyn's hand. "I'll give you a chance," Amara said quietly. "But you have to prove it. You have to show me you mean it." Evelyn nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I will," she said, her voice steady. "I will prove it to you. To all of you." The hospital room had settled into a tense calm after the storm of emotions that had passed through it. Evelyn stood by the small window, gazing out at the busy streets below. The noise of the city seemed distant now, muffled by the heavy weight of the moment. Inside, she could feel the uncertainty hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. Amara was sitting on the edge of the examination bed, The quadruplets huddled close to her. Their small bodies were a stark contrast to the cold, sterile room. Evelyn had promised Amara she would stay. But now, with the weight of her words sinking in, she realized just how much she had to prove. Words alone wouldn't be enough. She had already made too many mistakes in the past. Now, she had to show that she was different, that she could truly be a part of their lives. Amara hadn't said much since the DNA results were revealed. Her eyes were still full of suspicion and doubt, and Evelyn could understand why. She had shown up out of nowhere, claiming to be their grandmother, after years of abandoning her son and his family. How could anyone trust her now? The sound of small feet tapping against the floor broke Evelyn's thoughts. She turned to see Liam standing in the middle of the room, his tiny arms crossed over his chest, his eyes wide and curious. He was still too young to fully understand what had happened, but there was something in his eyes, a spark of hope, a small flicker of belief, that made Evelyn's heart ache. "Grandma," he said softly, the words still foreign on his tongue, but somehow comforting. "Are you really my grandma?" Evelyn's heart swelled. She stepped toward him, her hands shaking slightly as she reached out to him. "Yes, Liam," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm your grandma, and I'm not going anywhere." Liam looked up at her, his expression still uncertain but hopeful. He hesitated for a moment before slowly stepping forward, his small hand reaching for hers. Evelyn felt a tear slip down her cheek as she took his hand, pulling him into her arms gently. Amara watched from the bed, her eyes flicking between Evelyn and the children. Her lips were pressed tightly together, but there was a softness in her gaze now. She hadn't said anything, but Evelyn could tell that the walls between them were slowly starting to crumble, brick by brick. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "We should get them settled," Evelyn said softly, pulling Liam back gently so he could return to his siblings. "They need to be comfortable, and I want to make sure they have everything they need." Amara nodded but didn't speak. She stood up slowly, watching Evelyn as she moved to the children. The little ones were still wary, but their eyes followed Evelyn closely, drawn by the quiet tenderness in her movements. As Evelyn walked toward the bed, she noticed how small and fragile the children looked. They were so young, so full of life and energy, but their eyes carried the weight of hardships Evelyn couldn't even imagine. She had thought she understood pain, but now, seeing them up close, she realized how little she truly knew. She sat down on the edge of the bed, looking at each of them in turn. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly, her voice gentle. Noah, the quietest of the four, looked up at her, his dark eyes wide and filled with curiosity. He didn't speak, but his little hand reached out tentatively toward her, almost as if testing to see if she would pull away. Evelyn smiled softly and took his hand in hers, feeling the warmth of his tiny fingers. "It's okay," she said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "You're safe now." Sophie, sitting beside Noah, looked at Evelyn with wide eyes. She was the most expressive of the children, always quick to smile and quick to cry. "Are you really our grandma?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Evelyn nodded, her heart overflowing with emotion. "Yes, Sophie, I really am." Amara stood by the door, her arms crossed again as she watched the interaction. Evelyn could see the tension still in her body, the uncertainty that hadn't fully gone away. But there was something else in her eyes now, something softer, something that suggested she might be starting to believe Evelyn after all. "Can we go home now?" Liam asked, looking up at Evelyn with his big, innocent eyes. "I want to play with you." Evelyn's heart clenched at the simple request. It was everything she had hoped for, everything she had wanted, to be a part of their lives, to be there for them. But she knew it couldn't happen overnight. She had to earn their trust, step by step. Amara walked over slowly, her eyes soft but still cautious. "I'm not sure we're ready for that," she said quietly. "I'm not sure if I'm ready for that." Evelyn turned to her, her voice gentle but firm. "I understand, and I won't push. But I promise you, Amara, I will prove to you that I can be here for them. I can be the grandmother they deserve." Amara didn't respond immediately. She stood there for a moment, her gaze shifting between Evelyn and the children. Finally, she nodded, though her expression was still guarded. "I hope you mean that," she whispered. "I do," Evelyn said softly, her heart full of determination. "I do." The rest of the day passed in a quiet haze. Amara agreed to let Evelyn take the children to a small playroom in the hospital, where they could run around and have some fun. Evelyn stayed close, watching over them, making sure they were safe and happy. Each laugh, each moment of joy, made Evelyn feel like she was slowly finding her way back into their lives. As the day wore on, Evelyn could feel the exhaustion settling into her bones. It had been a long, emotional day, and the weight of it was starting to take its toll. But it wasn't just the physical exhaustion that weighed on her. It was the emotional exhaustion of knowing that the road ahead would be long, uncertain, and difficult. She had a lot to prove, and she knew it. But as the children played, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. Something she had been missing for so long. Amara finally approached her, her footsteps hesitant. She stopped a few feet away, her arms still crossed over her chest. "They like you," she said quietly, looking at the children. "They're starting to trust you." Evelyn smiled softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "It's a start," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "And I'll take it." Amara nodded, her eyes flicking over to the children. I think they deserve a family. And maybe, just maybe, you're part of that family." Evelyn's heart swelled. She wanted to say so much, but for the first time in a long time, words didn't seem enough. All she could do was nod and hope that, in time, she could prove herself worthy of their trust. The next few days passed in a blur of small steps. Each moment felt fragile, like a thread that could snap at any moment. Evelyn was learning how to navigate this new world, this world that had been waiting for her, but that she had ignored for so long. She watched the quadruplets with fascination, trying to understand their needs, their fears, and their hopes. Amara had allowed her to spend more time with them, but she still remained distant, a silent observer of their interactions. Evelyn understood. Trust couldn't be rushed. It had to be earned, piece by piece. Just as the children were learning to trust her, Amara was learning to trust her too. Each day, Evelyn spent hours with the children. She played with them, helped them with little tasks, and listened to their stories. They were small things, but to her, they meant everything. The children were still uncertain, their laughter soft and cautious, but there were moments when Evelyn felt the walls begin to crumble. Sophie would giggle when Evelyn made funny faces. Noah would run to her for comfort when he got scared during the night, and Liam, with his big eyes and earnest questions, started to call her grandma without hesitation. It was in these quiet moments that Evelyn felt something shifting inside her. The house, once empty and cold, was finally filled with the sounds of life. Laughter, whispers, and the soft patter of little feet running across the floors. It was chaotic, it was messy, but it was real. It was family. One evening, as the sun set and cast long shadows across the garden, Evelyn sat in the living room, watching Amara as she quietly prepared dinner. She could feel the weight of the silence between them, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. The space was no longer just filled with the sound of the clock ticking and the occasional sigh from Amara. It was filled with possibility. Evelyn took a deep breath and decided to break the silence. "Amara," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "I know you've been through so much. I can never undo what I've done, but I want to try. I want to help. I want to be part of their lives, your lives." Amara didn't look up from the pot she was stirring, but Evelyn could see her shoulders tense. "I don't know what you want me to say," Amara replied, her voice low. "You've made it clear you want to help, but it's not that easy. It's not that simple." Evelyn nodded. "I know, but I'm not asking for it to be simple. I'm asking for a chance. A real chance to show you, to show them, that I can be here for you. That I can be the mother I failed to be, the grandmother they deserve." Amara paused for a moment, the spoon she had been stirring with now resting on the counter. She didn't speak right away. It was clear she was processing Evelyn's words, trying to decide whether she was ready to take the risk. Finally, she turned around, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, something like hope, or perhaps a crack in the wall she had built around herself. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did," Amara said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I can't do this alone. I can't raise these children by myself. I've tried, and I've failed. Maybe you can help. But don't think it's going to be easy." Evelyn's heart raced as she stepped forward, slowly closing the distance between them. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove myself to you, to them." For the first time since they had met, Amara didn't look away. She didn't pull back. She looked Evelyn directly in the eyes, and Evelyn could see the battle in her gaze, the uncertainty, the fear, but also the faintest glimmer of trust. "Okay," Amara said quietly, "but it's on your terms. I won't let them get hurt again. I won't let you walk away when things get hard." Evelyn nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. "I won't walk away, Amara. I swear it." The tension in the room finally began to ease, and for the first time, Evelyn felt like she was truly standing on the same ground as Amara. They weren't enemies anymore. They were two women, bound by the love they both had for Daniel, and now for his children. The days that followed were a delicate dance of building trust and learning how to navigate their new, complicated family dynamic. Evelyn helped Amara with the children's meals, attended doctor's appointments, and sat in on the bedtime stories, each of them growing closer as a family. But there were still moments when Amara's walls went back up. There were still times when Evelyn could see the fear in Amara's eyes, the fear that she would lose the children, that Evelyn would disappear like she had before. It was understandable, but it hurt Evelyn deeply each time. One night, after a long day of play and laughter, Evelyn sat in the living room, her mind racing as she stared at the fireplace. She had spent the whole day with the children, watching them grow more comfortable around her, but it felt like there was still so much to prove. She knew she had to be patient, that this wasn't going to happen overnight, but her heart ached for the years lost. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She turned around to see Amara standing in the doorway, her face soft but uncertain. I think we should talk," Amara said, her voice hesitating. About what happens next? With the kids? With you?" Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. "Of course," she said quickly, standing up. "What's on your mind?" Amara took a deep breath, her eyes flickering over to the children, who were now asleep in the next room. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared of trusting you. Scared that you'll leave again. But I'm also scared of doing this on my own. I can't. I can't carry all of this anymore." Evelyn stepped closer to her, her voice low and steady. "You don't have to do it alone. You never will again. I'm here, Amara. I'll stay. I'll stay for you, for them." Amara nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll do this together." In that moment, Evelyn felt something shift deep inside her. They were taking the first real steps toward healing, toward building the family that they both had lost but now had a chance to rebuild. The road ahead would still be long and full of challenges, but Evelyn was finally starting to see a future where she wasn't just a distant memory of a mother who had failed. She was starting to see a future where she could truly be a grandmother, a mother, a protector, a part of this family. And that hope, that fragile, trembling hope, was enough to keep her moving forward. It had been weeks since that first tense moment in the hospital room, when Evelyn had stood there, uncertain and broken, asking for a chance to be part of the lives she had abandoned for so long. And now, looking around at the scene before her, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. The house was alive with laughter and chaos. The sound of tiny feet pattering across the floors, the children's voices echoing through the hallways, their faces lit up with joy. For the first time in years, this house didn't feel empty. It felt full of love, full of hope, full of life. Evelyn sat in the living room, watching the quadruplets as they played with their toys. Liam was building a tower of blocks, Sophie was trying to dress a stuffed bear, Noah was drawing in a notebook, and Ella was busy bouncing up and down on the couch, her infectious laughter filling the air. Amara sat beside her, a soft smile on her face as she watched her children. There was still a wariness in her eyes, a subtle hesitation, but there was also a quiet trust that hadn't been there before. They had come a long way. Evelyn had spent every day proving herself, showing Amara and the children that she was here to stay. She had learned their routines, their quirks, their fears, and their hopes. She had made sure that every day was filled with warmth, care, and love. She had been there when the children needed comfort, when Amara needed support, and when silence needed to be filled with the sound of laughter. But most importantly, she had been there when the children needed her, when they needed to know that they were safe, that they were loved, that they mattered. It hadn't been easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the past felt too heavy to bear. There were times when Evelyn had questioned whether she could truly rebuild the family she had lost. But in the end, it wasn't the grand gestures or the lavish gifts that mattered. It was the small moments, the shared smiles, the gentle hugs, the quiet promises that slowly, over time, began to heal the wounds that had been left open for so long. Evelyn looked at Amara, her heart swelling with gratitude. The younger woman had come a long way too. Her walls had been high and strong, built out of years of pain, betrayal, and fear. But with time, Amara had started to trust her, started to believe that she wasn't just another person who would abandon her and the children. Amara turned to Evelyn, her voice soft but steady. I never thought I'd say this, but I think we're starting to build something real here. A family. And it's not just because of you being their grandmother. It's because of you being here, showing us every day that we're worth something. Evelyn's throat tightened as she looked at the woman who had been a stranger to her not so long ago. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. For abandoning Daniel. For not being there when you needed me. But I'll make it right. I promise you that. Amara nodded slowly, her eyes soft. You don't have to keep saying that. I can see it in your eyes. I can see the way you look at them. They're yours too, just as much as they're mine. And for the first time, I believe it. Evelyn smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. She looked over at the children, who were now gathered on the floor, giggling and laughing together. They're perfect, Evelyn whispered, her voice full of awe. They are, Amara agreed, her voice thick with emotion. And they deserve all the love we can give them. For the first time, the house felt like a home. A real home. Not one built of stone and marble, but one built of love, understanding, and second chances. As the evening wore on, the family sat down together at the dinner table. The children, laughing and talking, chattered away while Evelyn and Amara exchanged smiles. It wasn't perfect. It was far from perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. The table was full, the children's faces lit up with joy, and the weight that had once sat so heavily on Evelyn's chest had finally begun to lift. She had found a way back to her son through the children he had left behind. And in doing so, she had found a way to make her own heart whole again. As the scene unfolded, a soft, comforting silence settled in the room, broken only by the sound of soft conversations and laughter. But beneath it all, a lesson had been learned. A lesson that went beyond blood, beyond family, beyond any of the obstacles that life had thrown in their way. Family isn't defined by what we've lost, but by what we're willing to rebuild. It's not about perfection, but about showing up, about being there for one another, no matter how many mistakes we've made or how many times we've fallen short. Love isn't something we deserve, it's something we give, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always, always with the hope that it will heal us and the ones we love. Evelyn had learned that lesson, and so had Amara. Together, they had learned that love isn't about waiting for the perfect moment, but about creating one, step by step. And in the laughter of the children, in the quiet moments of shared understanding, they had created something beautiful, a family built not of blood and history, but of love and second chances. Take a moment to reflect on the lessons from this story. Life can be hard, and the road to healing is long. But no matter what mistakes we've made, or how far we've fallen, there is always a chance to rebuild, to forgive, to love, and to start again. To anyone out there who feels like they have lost too much or that they have waited too long, remember, it's never too late to make things right. It's never too late to show up, to love, and to build a future. And if you've learned something from this story, something that gives you hope, something that encourages you to rebuild your own life or relationships, then take that with you. Let it inspire you to act with kindness, to never give up on love, and to always believe that, no matter how broken something may seem, there is always the possibility of putting the pieces back together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more emotional, inspiring stories. Your support helps us grow, and together, we can continue to share these stories of hope, redemption, and love.